Northern Nevada is a place of long shadows and silent plains, a land where the desert stretches endlessly under skies heavy with stars. For centuries, whispers have followed the winds through its canyons and dry riverbeds. Whispers of strange lights, creatures that walk like men but are not men, and of voices carried on the night air, though no one is there to speak them. The native tribes spoke carefully of this land, their stories etched not in books, but in warnings passed from parent to child. It was said the soil itself had memory, and that memory was not kind. It is here, hidden far from the highways and towns, that an isolated 600-acre property sits. To a casual traveler, it might appear ordinary: vast fields, rugged cliffs, and a winding creek splitting the valley in two. But the locals call it the Hollow Place, not out of affection, but out of caution. For generations, people avoided its boundaries. They claimed it was marked, not only by curses, but by something deeper, something that predated all memory. The elders told of hunters who never returned, of livestock found hollowed out as though drained from within, and of glowing figures that stood silently in the sagebrush, watching with eyes like burning coals. When outsiders came to the valley, they scoffed at these tales. What harm could dry earth and empty sky hold? But those who lingered often left, quickly, shaken by things they would not put into words. Some never left at all. For decades, the Hollow Place sat abandoned. Winds howled through its boarded windows, weeds choked its fences, and the creek swelled and receded with the seasons, until, in the mid-1990s, a family of 4 signed their names onto deeds they barely understood. For them, this was not just land. It was a dream. They believed they had stumbled upon a bargain: sprawling property, fertile fields, and a home they could restore. But as they drove the last miles of dirt road toward their new life, their youngest daughter whispered from the back seat, "Why are the windows locked from the outside?" Her parents dismissed it as childish nonsense, not realizing she had glimpsed the old homestead through the trees, its doors scarred with bolts and chains. The Hollow Place was waiting. The Hollow Place did not welcome them with silence. The very first day, as the family's pickup rumbled along the gravel path toward the old house, they saw something moving in the distance. At first it looked like a shadow cutting across the golden fields. Then it resolved into a shape. A dog, perhaps? No. It was too large. Its frame was thick and lean, its head broad, its movements deliberate. The closer it came, the more unsettling it became. The father, Robert Hayes, slowed the truck. His wife, Elena, tightened her grip on the dashboard, her knuckles pale. The children, Anna and Mark, pressed their faces to the glass. The creature moved in a series of graceful arcs, weaving across the pasture as if it had all the time in the world. Its coat was dark silver, its eyes a pale, glassy blue that caught the sunlight unnaturally. "A wolf," Robert muttered. But he didn't believe it. Not really. He had grown up in Montana, had seen wolves plenty of times, but nothing like this. Wolves weren't meant to stand taller than a man's waist. They weren't meant to gaze at you as though measuring the weight of your soul. The animal stopped about 30 yards from the truck, its massive body framed by the waving grass. Its tail swayed slowly, not in threat, but almost amusement. It seemed to smile. Then, without warning, it turned toward the corral that stood beside the homestead. Inside, a handful of cattle lowed nervously, shifting their hooves in the dust. One calf, curious, naive, poked its head between the wooden slats. The silver beast struck like lightning. By the time Robert leapt from the truck, the wolf had the calf's head clamped between its massive jaws, pulling with impossible strength. The corral groaned under the strain, wood cracking as the calf screamed in terror. "Hey!" Robert shouted, grabbing the first thing his hands found. A heavy steel wrench from the back of the truck. He swung hard against the animal's ribs. The blow would have dropped any ordinary creature. But the beast did not flinch. It did not bleed. "Gun!" Robert roared to his son. Mark scrambled, hands fumbling in panic, before he pulled the family's .357 revolver from the glove compartment. The shot rang out across the valley. Birds exploded from the trees. The calf thrashed harder. The wolf didn't even blink. Robert fired again and again. At point-blank range, bullets thudded into flesh. But there was no blood, no wound, no collapse, only those glassy blue eyes, unblinking, bored. Finally, on the fourth shot, the beast released the calf, stepping back with the same calmness it had approached with. The family stood frozen. Robert's chest heaved, his arms trembling from the adrenaline. The creature tilted its head, as though studying them one last time. Then it turned and padded away, vanishing into the brush as if nothing had happened. When Robert examined the calf, he expected to find its skull crushed, its neck broken. Instead, there was nothing. No wound, no blood, just a trembling, terrified animal staring out of the corral with wide, black eyes. That night, as the family lay awake in the creaking old homestead, Robert turned the memory over and over in his mind. He thought about the way the wolf had vanished into the brush, the way the bullets had sunk into it with no effect, the way it had smiled. Wolves do not smile. And yet he knew. The hollow place had. The following morning, Robert walked the perimeter of the house with a sinking stomach. He had noticed the night before that the doors had been scarred by bolts and bars, but in the daylight, the sight was worse. The windows were reinforced with rusting iron latches, as though someone had been desperate to keep something out, or in. Thick metal rings were set into the brick on either side of the porch. At first he thought they were for decoration. Then he noticed the scuff marks in the wood, the indentations in the soil below. Something had been chained there. Something large. "Guard dogs," Elena suggested weakly when he showed her. But she didn't sound convinced. Inside, things were no better. The bedrooms had locks on the inside and the outside. Closet doors were bolted shut with chains. Even the attic hatch had been nailed closed from below. Maybe the last owners were eccentric, Robert muttered, though the words rang hollow in his throat. Eccentric people didn't chain their homes like fortresses. That evening, as the sun bled orange across the valley, Anna came running into the kitchen, eyes wide. "Mom, the groceries." Elena followed her back to the counter. She had just unpacked bags of food, cans, vegetables, bread, and lined them neatly in the pantry. Now every single item was back in the bags, as though she had never touched them. "Did you repack them?" she asked her daughter. Anna shook her head. Mark, her son, was upstairs in his room. He hadn't even come down. Elena's stomach twisted. She laughed it off, too loudly, too forced, and unpacked the groceries again. But when she turned back 5 minutes later, the bags were full again. The morning mist clung thickly to the hollow place. It rolled low over the grass, gray and heavy, curling between the corral posts like smoke from a dying fire. Robert stepped outside, boots crunching in the dew, the revolver heavy on his hip. He hadn't slept. None of them had. The night before, something had padded along the porch for hours. Each creak of the old boards had echoed through the house like footsteps circling them. The chains on the attic hatch rattled once, faint but clear. Robert had pressed his ear to the ceiling and heard. Breathing. Now, with the dawn bleeding across the hills, he told himself daylight would bring reason, evidence, tracks, proof. Walked out toward the corral, rifle now slung across his shoulder. The grass was bent low where the beast had stood yesterday, pressed flat in the shape of massive paws. Robert knelt. His heart slowed. His lungs caught. The tracks were deep. Too deep. No wolf left imprints like that. The pads were elongated. The claws sunk into the earth as though they were knives. Worse, each step was nearly 5 feet apart, far too wide for any natural stride. He followed them across the field. They wound down toward the creek, grass bent like something had dragged its body low against the earth. The trail was perfect, uninterrupted, until it wasn't. The prints simply stopped. Robert blinked, crouched lower. He ran his hand across the damp ground. 1 step, 2 step, 3, gone. No scatter of dirt, no lip, no break in the soil, just clean earth and untouched grass stretching toward the horizon. As though the creature had melted into the air, a cold wind ran through him. He stood, scanning the tree line. The silence pressed heavy, so thick it hurt his ears. No birds. No insects. Nothing. Then far behind him came the sound. Hoofbeats. The cattle in the corral screamed. Robert turned, sprinting back up the hill. His chest burned, his boots slipping in the dew. When he reached the fence, the cattle were thrashing violently, kicking against the wood as though the corral itself were on fire. Their eyes rolled white, their bodies slammed together in a frenzy, and hovering above them, at least for a moment. Robert swore he saw it. A shape, translucent, rippling in the morning mist. The beast. Its silver hide gleamed faintly, its eyes glowing pale blue, like lanterns in fog. Its jaws opened wide, dripping shadow instead of saliva. Robert raised the rifle, his hands shaking, but just as quickly as it had appeared, the vision was gone. The corral stood empty, the cattle gasping, stamping, alive. He lowered the gun slowly, his heart pounding so hard it hurt. From the porch, Elena called his name. Her voice cracked with fear. He turned and froze. Anna was standing in the upstairs window, but her reflection was wrong. Her real body stood still, staring down at him with wide, frightened eyes. Yet in the glass, her reflection smiled. Wide, too wide, teeth too sharp. The smile did not belong to his daughter. The sun sank fast that evening, as though the valley swallowed light too hungrily. By the time shadows stretched across the hollow, the air was already heavy, the sky bruised with purples and blacks. Robert lit every lantern he could find, their golden glow casting soft halos in the gloom. The family gathered in the parlor, but no one spoke. Elena sat rigidly in her chair, rosary beads wrapped so tightly around her hand that the wood cut into her skin. Anna lay curled against her, her tiny shoulders trembling each time the wind brushed against the shutters. Daniel tried to act brave, resting one hand on the rifle that leaned against the wall, though his eyes betrayed him, darting from shadow to shadow, as if expecting each corner of the room to move. Robert kept pacing. His boots thudded softly on the warped wooden floorboards. He told himself he needed to stay calm, to keep the others steady. But his body betrayed him, his jaw clenched tight, his hands slick with sweat, his breath shallow. The silence in the house was unnatural. No creak of timbers settling, no whistle of wind through cracks. Just silence, as though the house itself was holding its breath. Then the sound came. It started faint. A dragging, scraping noise above them. Something heavy pulled across the attic floor. A long pause. Then again. Drag. Pause. Drag. Elena's grip on Anna tightened until the girl whimpered. Daniel grabbed the rifle, cocking it clumsily. Robert raised a hand, urging him to wait, straining to hear. The dragging stopped. Silence again, then 3 knocks, slow and deliberate, echoed from the ceiling. 1, 2, 3. Robert's chest froze. His instincts screamed to stay still, but before he could react, Anna spoke. Her voice was soft, distant, not quite her own. "They're hungry." The words slithered through the room like smoke. Elena clutched her daughter, shaking her, whispering prayers frantically. Anna blinked, eyes blank, then suddenly gasped, as if waking from a dream. She looked up at her mother, tears spilling. "I didn't say that," she whispered. Before anyone could respond, the lamps flickered. Once, twice, then all went out. Darkness swallowed them whole. The only light left was the thin silver of the moon through the cracked shutters. In that dimness, Robert swore the walls themselves rippled, as though the wood was not solid but flesh. The boards seemed to breathe, inhaling, exhaling. Then the voices began. At first just a murmur, whispers threading through the dark, overlapping, dozens at once. Some sounded like men, some like women, some like children crying. Their words blurred. Together, phrases too broken to catch. But one voice cut clear, deep, cruel, right beside Robert's ear. "Open the attic." Robert spun, swinging the revolver up, but saw only empty air. His pulse thundered in his ears, his finger hovering over the trigger. The whispers grew louder, circling the room, rising into a frenzy. Shadows stretched across the walls, twisting into shapes that should not exist. Limbs too long, faces without eyes, jaws that gaped impossibly wide. Daniel screamed and fired the rifle. The blast lit the room in a flash of orange. For a split second, the shot revealed them. Figures crouched in the corners, clinging to the ceiling like insects, crawling along the beams with movements too jerky, too wrong. Their eyes gleamed pale, blue, hundreds of them, all staring at the family below. Then the light died. The figures vanished back into shadow. Anna shrieked, covering her ears. Elena dragged her close, chanting prayers louder and louder, the beads of her rosary snapping, one by one. Robert held his revolver tight, his knuckles white. He whispered to himself, to no one, to the house, "You won't take them, not my family." And then the knocking began again, louder, not above, but below, from under the floorboards. This time it wasn't 3 knocks. It was many, a dozen, fists pounding in unison, trying to get out. Morning never came the way it should. When Robert opened his eyes, he expected light breaking through the shutters. Instead, the world outside was gray and muted, as if dawn had died before it reached them. The air inside the house smelled coppery, thick, like the metallic sting of rust mixed with decay. Elena stirred beside Anna, her face pale, lips cracked. She hadn't slept. Robert could tell by her trembling hands, the rosary now just a broken string of beads scattered across the floor. Daniel slumped in the chair with the rifle in his lap, his eyes bloodshot, his skin clammy. Then Anna gasped. She was pointing at the far wall, her small finger quivering. Robert followed her gaze, and his stomach dropped. A dark stain spread across the boards, slow at first, then faster, as though something inside the wood itself was seeping out. Thick red liquid trickled down in uneven streams, dripping onto the warped floorboards. Blood. Elena screamed and covered Anna's eyes, though the girl had already seen it. Daniel stumbled to his feet, swearing, the rifle clattering as he raised it shakily. "It's a trick," he muttered, his voice breaking. "Just a trick of the wood." But the house answered him. The blood didn't just drip, it pulsed, beating with a rhythm like a heart pushing it through veins. The walls themselves shuddered, groaning with a deep, guttural sound. With every pulse, more blood gushed, coating the boards, pooling on the floor, creeping toward their feet. Robert pulled everyone back, dragging them to the far side of the room, but the floor there was no better. Cracks split open between the boards, and from them oozed more red, along with writhing strands of something pale and sinewy, like veins searching for flesh. Anna screamed again, clutching her ears. "They're waking up. Papa, they're waking up." Robert dropped to his knees beside her, holding her shoulders, shaking her gently. Who's waking up?" She only sobbed harder, whispering through her tears. "The ones under the house, the ones who don't sleep." Robert froze, his heart pounding against his ribs. He glanced at the others, but neither Elena nor Daniel dared to speak. The blood spread wider, faster now, covering the floor in a slick layer that reflected the trembling lantern light. The smell was suffocating. Then came the pounding again. From beneath the house, fists hammered at the floor, stronger this time, shaking dust from the beams. The boards bent upward, as though ready to break. Daniel panicked. He lifted the rifle, aiming down at the blood-soaked boards, and fired. The gunshot deafened the room. The boards split open. From the cracks, pale hands shot through. Dozens of them. Long fingers clawed the air, nails black and jagged. They gripped the edges of the floor, pulling, tearing the wood apart. Elena screamed, dragging Anna back against the wall. Robert fired his revolver, the shots useless against the inhuman grip that only multiplied. Hands clawed higher, followed by arms, followed by glimpses of faces pressed against the underside of the boards. Faces too warped to be human, eyes glowing that sickly blue. Robert shoved the others toward the door, his voice hoarse with panic. "Upstairs, now." They stumbled into the hallway, feet slipping on the blood that now flowed like water, chasing them with every step. The walls wept, crimson pouring from cracks, dripping from the ceiling. The house groaned like a living beast, each board moaning, each nail shrieking. They reached the staircase. Daniel led the way, firing blindly at the creatures, forcing their way through the floor below. Elena clutched Anna, half dragging her up the steps. Robert was last, revolver shaking, his legs heavy as though the blood itself tried to pull him down. Halfway up, Anna stopped. Her head snapped toward the wall, her eyes wide and empty. "They don't want us to go upstairs," she said flatly. The words froze Robert mid-step. He looked back and saw the hallway behind them close in. The walls warped, bending inward, shrinking the passage. Blood ran like rivers down the narrowing space. The house wasn't just bleeding. It was alive, and it was hungry. The stairs groaned under their weight, each step vibrating like the bones of some vast creature shifting in its sleep. Robert's breath came ragged as he pushed Elena and Anna upward, Daniel stumbling just ahead of them with the rifle clutched tight. When they reached the landing, the air was colder, not just chill, empty, as though the house itself sucked the breath from their lungs. The lantern sputtered, its flame shrinking, casting weak light along the narrow hallway. There were doors on either side, 5 of them, maybe 6. Robert blinked hard, counting again, but the number shifted. The hallway stretched longer, the doors rearranging themselves. Some vanished into the walls, others appeared where none had been. "This isn't right," Elena whispered, her teeth chattering. She pulled Anna close, shielding her eyes. Anna didn't struggle. She only looked up at the ceiling, her small face pale and calm. "It knows where we are now," she said quietly. "We can't hide anymore." Daniel cursed under his breath. He stomped forward, trying the nearest door. Locked. He shoved his shoulder into it. The wood bent, but didn't break. With a snarl, he lifted the rifle butt and smashed it against the knob. The sound rang out, hollow, mocking. The door swung open, not to a room, to another hallway, this one darker, longer, stretching into blackness. Elena gasped and pulled Anna back. No, we're not going in there." Behind them, a sound rose. The tearing of wood, the splintering of nails. The creatures below were climbing. The floor they'd just fled cracked and bulged. Pale hands, too many to count, groped up through the gaps. Faces pressed against the splintered beams, their blue-lit eyes burning like coals. The pounding shook the staircase itself. Dust raining from the ceiling. Robert fired 2 quick shots down the steps. The bullets sank into flesh, but the creatures didn't flinch. Their hands only multiplied, dragging their twisted forms higher. "Move," Robert shouted. Shoving everyone through the open door, they ran. The hallway swallowed them. Their footsteps echoed unnaturally, too loud, as though 1,000 others ran just behind. The walls pressed close, then pulled wide, breathing with the rhythm of a lung. They reached another set of doors. 3 this time, all identical. Daniel spun to Robert, his eyes wild. "Which one?" Robert stared, chest heaving. He didn't know. None of them made sense. Each door pulsed faintly, as if veins ran through the wood. Anna raised her hand, pointing. "That one." Her voice was steady, too steady for a child. Robert hesitated. "How do you—" She didn't look at him. "Because it wants us to pick the others." No one questioned her. Daniel yanked the chosen door open. They stumbled into a room. The air was thick and damp, heavy with mold. The wallpaper peeled in long strips, and the floor creaked underfoot. A single bed sat against the wall, its sheets gray with dust. On the far side was a window, the first they'd seen upstairs. Daniel rushed to it, yanking the curtains apart. His face twisted. "There's nothing out there," he whispered. Robert moved beside him, staring. He was right. Beyond the glass was not the forest, not the night, not the world they had left behind. It was black, endless, shifting, like tar boiling in silence. Faces floated just beneath the surface, pale and screaming, pressed against the glass, as if begging to be let in. Elena cried out and backed away, clutching Anna so tight the girl whimpered. Robert turned toward the door and froze. The hallway was gone. The door now opened to another room, this one identical to the one they stood in. Same bed, same window, same air. Robert's chest tightened. It's a trap, Anna finished. For him. Her eyes were wet, but her voice unshaken. It's not a house anymore. It's hunting us. The walls groaned around them, a low, hungry sound. The floor trembled as if a heartbeat pulsed beneath. Daniel raised the rifle, pointing it at the door. Then we fight our way out. But the door began to melt. The wood softened, sagging like wax over flame. From the dripping frame, hands pushed through. Fingers first, then arms, then shoulders. Dozens of them, writhing, clawing, pulling themselves into the room. Elena screamed. Anna buried her face against her mother's chest. Robert grabbed Daniel's shoulder. Not here. We'll be overrun. We need higher ground. The attic. As if hearing his thought, a narrow ladder creaked down from the ceiling. It hadn't been there before. For a moment, no one moved. The house offered them a way up. But was it escape? Or a trap within a trap? The ladder groaned as Robert grabbed the first rung. His hands shook, sweat slick against the wood. He glanced back at the others, their faces pale in the dim lantern. Light! Go, he hissed. Climb, all of you. Now. Elena didn't hesitate. She pushed Anna upward first, her small hands gripping the rung as though it were the only solid thing left in the world. Daniel covered them with the rifle, his eyes darting between the melting door and the writhing hands spilling through. One of the creatures shoved its face through the broken frame, its jaw stretched unnaturally wide, teeth clicking like bones, rattling in a jar. Daniel fired. The blast shook the room, the face exploding into black ash. But more pressed forward, forcing their way inside. Go, Daniel, Robert barked, firing another shot into the swarm. I'll be right behind you. Daniel hesitated, then slung the rifle across his back and scrambled up the ladder. Robert followed last. The moment his head cleared the floor, the ladder jerked violently, pulled down by unseen hands. It clattered and snapped, vanishing into the black tide below. They were trapped in the attic. The air was thick, hot, almost suffocating. Dust swirled in their lantern glow. The roof beams sagged above like crooked ribs. Trunks and boxes lay scattered, old furniture stacked as though forgotten decades ago. But what froze them all was the sound. Whispers, thousands of them. They slithered between the rafters, hissed through the floorboards, seeped from the walls. At first they were faint, too low to make out. Then words began to take shape. Stay. Forever. Hours. You cannot leave. Elena pressed her hands over Anna's ears, but the girl pulled them away, her eyes wide and distant. They're not talking to us, she whispered. Robert turned sharply. What do you mean? Anna's lips trembled. They're talking through us. They've always been here, waiting. Daniel cursed and kicked over a trunk. Its lid cracked open, spilling old clothes, brittle with age. But beneath them lay something else. Bones. Small ones. Children's bones. Elena gasped, stumbling backward, her hand flying to her mouth. Robert froze, his chest tightening. Daniel swore again, louder this time, but his voice broke halfway. Anna knelt by the trunk. Her fingers hovered over the bones, trembling. They never left, she murmured. That's why it smells like them. That's why they whisper. Robert knelt, gripping her shoulders. Anna, how do you know this? What aren't you telling us? For the first time since the nightmare began, Anna's face cracked. Tears slid down her cheeks, glistening in the lantern glow. "Because," she said, her voice small, "I've heard them before." Elena stared at her daughter in horror. "What do you mean?" Anna's eyes lifted, staring into the shadows above the rafters. "The night before we came here, they spoke to me in my dreams. They showed me this house. They told me we were coming." Silence fell. Only the whispers remained, now growing louder, circling them like wolves. Daniel slammed his fist against the beam. "You knew? You knew this was waiting for us." Anna's tears fell faster, but she didn't look away. "I didn't understand. I thought it was just nightmares. I thought they were just voices. I didn't know it was real." The whispers rose, overlapping, filling the attic with a suffocating chorus. The lantern sputtered, shadows writhing across the walls. Then slowly, the whispers shaped into a single voice. Deep, hollow, inside their heads. "Give her to us." The lantern nearly went out. Elena clutched Anna to her chest, her whole body trembling. "No, you can't have her." The attic shook. Dust rained from the beams. The trunks rattled, lids bursting open as bones spilled across the floor. Skulls rolled toward them, jaws clicking in mock laughter. Robert raised his gun, though his hands trembled. "You're not taking her," the voice hissed again, shaking the air. "She is already ours." Anna whimpered, clutching her head. Her eyes rolled back, her small body convulsing in Elena's arms. The attic grew darker. The walls closed in, groaning like the ribcage of a beast, tightening around them. And then, from the far corner, a shadow uncoiled itself. Not human, not creature. Something vast and wrong, its body pressed flat against the rafters, stretching like tar. Its face had no features, only a hole that gaped wider, wider, until the attic shook with its hunger. The voice came again, no longer in their heads, but from that hole, deep and endless. "Choose the girl, or the rest of you." Robert's hands shook, revolver raised, though he knew bullets could do nothing against the shadow in front of them. Elena's arms trembled as she held Anna close, her heart hammering against her chest. Daniel swore under his breath, scanning the room for anything that could help them. The shadow loomed, stretching further, pressing against the rafters like a living stain. Its voice, hollow and endless, echoed inside their heads, and the attic all at once. "Choose," it whispered, "the girl, or the rest of you." Anna whimpered but did not cry. Her small face was pale, but her eyes burned with a strange calm, as though she understood something her parents did not. Robert's mind raced. "I can't lose her, not my daughter." Elena shook her head violently. "We can't let it take her. We won't." The shadow pulsed, responding to their defiance. The walls of the attic groaned louder, beams cracking and splintering. Dust and debris fell around them. Anna spoke, her voice soft, but echoing strangely. "It's not just me. It's the house. It feeds on fear. It wants us to make the choice." Robert froze. "Then what do we do? How do we stop it?" Anna pointed toward a narrow window, the only one in the attic. "You can't fight it. You can only trick it." The shadow hesitated, the pulsing slowing, as if it had understood her words. Robert glanced at her, confused. "I'll do it," Anna said. "I'll pretend I'm giving myself to it. But you have to run. Go now. Don't look back." Elena shook her head violently. "No, Anna, we can't leave you." "Yes, you must," the girl insisted, "or it will take all of us. Trust me." The shadow throbbed with anticipation, the hollow voice now 1,000 voices whispering in unison. "Bring her! Bring her!" Anna stepped forward. Her small form moved with eerie calm toward the center of the attic. She raised her hands, as if offering herself. Robert's throat tightened. "Anna?" The shadow surged forward, its edges stretching, reaching. Its form darkened the room, swallowing every flicker of lantern light. It drifted toward her, hungry and patient. Then she stopped. A soft blue glow erupted from Anna's chest. It expanded, filling the attic with cold, brilliant light. The shadow recoiled, shrieking, writhing as if scalded by invisible fire. Its voice was now pained, almost human. "You cannot take what does not belong." Anna's voice rang louder than the shadow's wailing. She pressed her palms together, and the glow intensified, flooding the attic, the hallways, even the walls below. The shadow screeched, stretching one last time before it collapsed inward, melting into itself, leaving nothing behind but a cold, empty silence. The house groaned once more, violently, but this time in defeat. The floorboards stabilized. The walls no longer pulsed. The blood that had run across the attic and hallways drained into nothingness, leaving only the smell of old wood and dust. Lena dropped to her knees, hugging Anna tightly. Daniel sank beside them, shaking, unable to speak. Robert looked around, the attic, chest heaving, his hands trembling. The house was silent, empty, still. Anna pulled back slightly, her small hands resting on her mother's shoulders. "It's gone," she whispered. "It won't come back, not while I'm here." Robert stared at her, awe and terror mingling. You saved us?" She nodded, though the glow around her faded. Her eyes were just a little brighter than before, almost like the memory of the shadow's blue gaze. For the first time, the family dared to breathe. They left the attic carefully, stepping down the stairs, watching every corner, every shadow. The house seemed inert, lifeless, almost normal. Outside, the sky had cleared. The first rays of sunlight cut through the clouds, bathing the forest in soft gold. Birds sang in the distance. For the first time in weeks, the world felt real again. The family did not wait. They packed what little they could and left the house behind. They never returned. Years later, Robert, Elena, and Daniel would speak in whispers about that house, about the shadows that lived in walls, about whispers that crawled into your mind, about the glow in Anna's eyes that had saved them all. Some nights, Anna still dreamed of the attic, of the whispers, of the shadow, of the house that hunted. But she never feared it again. She had faced the darkness and emerged unbroken. The house, however, still stands, silent, empty, waiting, and sometimes when the wind is just right. The locals say you can hear faint whispers carried across the valley, calling for those foolish enough to enter.